Hello, I'm Dr. Daisy Kuchnat, and today is my first day on YouTube. Um, and I have decided to talk about the elephant in the room that our civilization is ignoring to our own peril. Anyway, I am Dr. Daisy Kuchnat, as I said. I I have left India for the U.S. When I was 17, and I was grew up and was trained there as a physician. I worked for 35 years as an internist in allopathic medicine, and in the interim, I got some exposure to Ayurveda, and I got personally interested in it. And I started a small place in Kerala, which is my home, where I do have friends come over for Ayurvedic treatments, etc. So I've had quite a bit of knowledge about Ayurveda and Indian ancient medicine too. Um, we all know that right now we are going through a phase of our civilization where we are in existential crisis. It is not about just a war or something that can be fixed. It seems like we are being hit from every side. And we are truly in existential crisis, both because of our own loss of meaning of our own lives, as well as the rapid depletion of resources that we depend on to live. So, after many years of reading about all these things and getting exposed to a lot of very wise people, I am trying to summarize some of the issues and gain some insight and for all of us together to get some insight into these things and translate them into action items in our own lives uh, to get back alive. So today's topic is wisdom. So, one of the reasons, I think the main reason that we are in the state we are is our squeezing wisdom out of every aspect of our life. So let's first talk about what is wisdom and how do you define it. It is a hard word to define. It is a hard word to define. And the latest definitions I found in all the dictionaries, the Merriam and the Webster, all those dictionaries seem to be somewhat unsatisfactory to me. And I started searching for ancient definitions. And so I looked at what Aristotle and Seneca how they talked about wisdom. So Aristotle essentially thought that to have wisdom, you have to have a pretty good basic idea of truth itself, as well as the universal truths and practical wisdom, so that we can make reasonable and sound decisions to both make our lives meaningful as well as for the survival of our species as well as the earth. Seneca, on the other hand, thought that was not enough. He had a different take on it, and he thought wisdom mainly involved the individual's firmness of mind, mastery of desires, and living in accordance with nature and focusing on one's own actions. So these were some of the Greek and ancient definitions. Now, I have kind of tried to gather different bits of definitions and kind of give an idea so that we all can have a better idea. So we know that wisdom is not just knowledge. Knowledge in itself is not wisdom. To say that knowledge is wisdom is like saying that the ingredients of the soup is the soup itself. The ingredients of the soup doesn't make the soup. So you have to actually do certain, they have to interact. All the truths have to interact. All the knowledge have to interact, and it creates this other thing that is nutritious, edible, and helps us survive and thrive, right? So that's one way to look at it. For example, the physical, taking care of all the physical needs of a child is not by definition nurturing a child. There's no guarantee that that child, with all its physical needs met, is going to grow up to be a happy, functional human being. We all know that a child to grow up, or at least we used to know, needs more than just meeting its physical needs. And towards the end of this video, I will actually tell you a story about this whole aspect, okay? So, the way I kind of look at wisdom is the link between the knowledge and experience we gather and universal values or truth, which are essential for meaning. Because if we don't have our knowledge, our actions linked to values that flourish life and sustain life, then life becomes meaningless. So wisdom is that ingredient that comes out. It's the soup that comes out after you put all the ingredients together. Okay, that's the way I look at it. In one way to also, I was thinking about is to look at it is it allows a deference to awe. It allows us to be in awe of things. Because when we are in awe of things, we know we can't explain the awe only with knowledge. You can explain the galaxies, you can explain the universe, you can have theories of the universe, but the awe that you feel when you look at the sky cannot be explained by logic, knowledge, etc. And it kind of gives you a peek into what is not knowable with logic and intellect, and how it is critical for meaning and survival and thriving. Okay, so what does wisdom need? Okay, how is wisdom? How does wisdom come into existence? We can assume, or many people, or most people, kind of have this idea that there is a universal wisdom. Whether we call it God, or whether we call it the universal laws of nature, or the order or disorder in the universe that creates life. So there are all sorts of ways we kind of glimpse into what this wisdom is, okay? We have a little taste of it. But we know that, at least on the practical aspect, most wisdom comes through direct experience or observation and insights into experience over long periods of time. So the passage of time is also required for the making, or at least at least acknowledging or seeing, for the wisdom to become visible. For example, the concept, things may seem, so when a process starts, like when a butterfly is beginning, it starts with a caterpillar. And if you didn't know about the whole experience of the caterpillar, and that it eventually becomes a butterfly that flies, and we only focused on the caterpillar, we would think that in itself is the end. The caterpillar is the end, right? But because of life experiences and observation and attention, we now know that the caterpillar turns into a pupa, chrysalis, and then it goes through many stages before it becomes a butterfly, right? So same thing like delayed gratification, right? So at the beginning of a process, like for example, a student, a medical student, which I was, life is extremely tough, extremely tough. I've had days when I cried and I thought how I got into this mess. I mean, life seemed meaningless and sleep deprived and completely a torture, not at all what I thought it was going to be. But at the back of my mind, I also knew it was a process, that I had to go through this hardship to eventually become a physician. And yes, and eventually that happened with the sacrifices and also lots of moments of joy, right? But in the end, you become a physician and you feel good about being able to help people, as well as the fact that you got through the process and that you quote unquote achieved some meaning in your life, right? So that's delayed gratification. So that's kind of a practical aspect of what wisdom brings about, right? So what a process that seems to be like in the beginning and what its ends are going to be may not be what it is. That's why we need wisdom, because we can't predict the end unless we know people who have gone through the process, right? Wisdom also involves discernment, like being able to look through and paying attention to the right aspect of knowledge and the right aspect of experience and what is out there. You know, our world is totally overwhelming in terms of stimulus and interactions, right? So it involves a sifting through time and experience of the pearls, the gems that are essential. So now, in summary, wisdom is the key to meaning. Meaning in life. It gives us the anchor which we can put down to say that life is meaningful, because it functions on an underlying wisdom. So, examples of how wisdom works is, I'll give you a story of the pearl. So if you look at the pearl, the story of the pearl is that some irritant, like a tiny speck of sand, gets into the mouth of the oyster, inside the shell of the oyster, not the mouth of the oyster, the shell of the oyster. And the flesh of the oyster is very soft and very fragile. So this little tiny speck of sand causes a lot of irritation for the oyster. So what it does is it makes a secretion, a mucus, that keeps covering this speck of sand until the surface becomes smooth and it becomes part of the oyster. The oyster doesn't even feel that it's there because it's a smooth surface. It's used to this foreign being, body being in its mouth, which now it has covered it with its own self, with its own secretion. So that's a good analogy for suffering, right? So a lot of misfortunes happen in our lives, and we can decide for that to be a learning experience. It can be something that makes us even better human beings and resilient, because the way you get through that suffering makes you stronger and more resilient, and in some ways more joyful, because you did get through that. Or even if you didn't get through it, if you became resilient and you are willing to go on with life, then that is still useful. Now, so that's the example of a pearl. We can use another example, which is the example of a mesothelioma. That's a medical term, where asbestos fibers get into the lung and the body doesn't have the wisdom or doesn't have the means to digest it. It remains. There's no way to get rid of it. Other toxins, many of which the body, the macrophages and other cells from the immune system can break it up and absorb it and get rid of it. But these are fibers that are irritants that cannot be got. The body does not have the wisdom to get rid of it. So it gets lodged in different parts, especially in the periphery of the lung. And eventually, because of the constant inflammation and irritation, it becomes a cancer, which is called mesothelioma. So, in an indirect way, the body lacking the wisdom to deal with the asbestos fibers leads to cancer, right? So, it may not be an exact analogy, but it kind of gives you an idea of where I'm going. Okay, so the wisdom, the presence of wisdom makes thriving and survival possible. Okay, so when it comes to the resilience of a civilization, there is nothing more than wisdom that's going to make us survive. If we do not have wisdom, there is absolutely no way we can survive, right? So, let's ask, what is happening in today's society? So let's take some main issues. So we have incredible amount of knowledge now, incredible amount of knowledge, an incredible amount of science, some of it very good and some of it manipulated and not good. But we do have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of science. Whether it's knowledge through science or knowledge through observation or whatever it is, science and knowledge without wisdom at best can lead to expediency of actual doing things. But it does not in real life improve actually our lives, our meanings, or quality of life, the real quality of life. Because you can measure quality of life in different ways, okay? Two ways. One is material ways. So some people might think or consider that quality of some person's life is really good because they have all the material wants done. But we all know that that's not true. You can have all the material things in the world that you need, but we all know we live for love, we live for companionship, we live for compassion, we live for forgiveness, we live for camaraderie. All these values are not material and they cannot be measured. And they are the products. They can thrive. These values can thrive only with wisdom. And unless these values thrive, we will not survive. We will not survive. There's no question about it. No amount of technology without wisdom is going to make mankind or this earth survive. In fact, we are running towards the extinction at high speeds because of this edging out of wisdom for expediency and, and the dollar side. We are really short-sighted in that sense. So what is technology really doing? If you really ask yourself what technology is doing, number one thing, the basic, it increases the speed of processes, right? It increases the speed of processes. So if it is increasing the speed of processes, what it is doing is basically siphoning resources or money to few people. Okay? Secondly, and even more importantly, what it's doing is externalizing all our internal competencies, right? Now we don't really need to really write new music, whatever. some machine can write it for you, or it can at least help you, or have hacks, or whatever. You really, we don't even write anymore. We can speak, but now we don't even need to speak at some point. I guess they will read our eye movements, and at some point they'll even be, technology will, they say, will be able to even read our emotions. So, and I'm sure it will eventually be able to control what you think also, okay, which it is already, right? So what has it brought about so far? The rush towards technology, what has it brought? It has brought bad health for a lot of human beings, addictions, loneliness, inability to communicate with other human beings in a normal way. I heard stories about teenagers on a date who are not able to speak to each other. They have to text under the table. Okay? And people, the more you externalize all these competencies that are internal, the ability to feel and actually do a day's hard work to produce something, the more meaningless a person's life becomes, the more meaningless. And then if we are also isolated in our own selves, then you add all the other problems of loneliness, depression, quote unquote, that you don't matter. You can live, die, and it doesn't matter. You don't have any, you don't have a choice, you're just there. Whatever you can do, a machine can do so much better than you. But that's what they claim is going to happen, okay? So, I'm not against technology at all. I do think we need technology. We have come a long way, and there's a lot of things we can do both to help ourselves and the earth and everything. But it cannot trump wisdom. Technology cannot be God. It has to be, all technology has to be within the realm of wisdom. Is this, every time we have a technology, we have to ask ourselves, how is it actually improving the quality of, beyond the physical, beyond the material? How is it improving our quality of life? Is it really improving our quality of life? Do we really have a lot more free time? Are more people happy? Are more people richer? Actual numbers, both materially and emotionally and in all other ways. Are we proud of our knowledge that we have now? Or do you think, what if I know or I don't know? I could have just Googled it, right? So you really have to think, is this technology without conscience, is it really improving our lives? In fact, what it's doing is destroying us in a lot of ways and destroying our resources, our internal psychic and other resources that we had. I could do square roots in my head when I finished high school from India and came, at least basic square roots. Now I can't even add and subtract. Even if I do, I have to use a calculator to confirm. I don't trust myself. I don't trust my brain. I don't trust my mind. Even if I think of a fact that I know, I want to confirm it with Google or other things, right? So we are externalizing all our internal competencies, and it does not make me personally feel good. I don't know whether it makes you feel good, but it does not make me feel good, okay? So the other example, so that I would call science and knowledge without wisdom, right? Wealth without wisdom, right? The whole idea of extreme capitalism, where you're saying that, okay, if you have the means to accumulate wealth, and if you're bright, and if you work hard, and if you can accumulate wealth, that's good for society. And then you have on the other side extreme socialism or communism, where people are saying all that matters to human beings are their material needs. And whatever we do, whether it be prohibiting speech or punishing people for, if they express their thoughts freely, that they should be jailed because they are getting those things will make the plan of having enough material, meeting all the material needs of everybody, will be affected. So basically, you will have to restrict your humanness. The irony is both extreme capitalism and extreme socialism or communism, both are focused on material, which I think is the lowest rung of the ladder. In terms of survival, yes. In terms of a physical survival, it is yes. It is an essential foundation. You need material, basic material needs. But beyond that, I think 90% of what we call meaning and are making life worth living is not material. I have seen very, very poor people in India who do have shelter and some food, but much, much happier than people who have a lot more material wealth. So both groups are completely misguided that actually material things will, on one side it is saying it is individual freedom and a person's freedom to accumulate wealth that trumps everything. On the other side you're saying everybody's material needs should be met, so individualism and free speech should be suppressed. Both are equally bad. Why are they bad? Because wisdom is not acknowledged. The elephant in the room is not acknowledged. The fact of the matter is that there is no quote unquote free individual, and not all human beings are created equal. So in socialistic and communistic societies, they assume that all human beings have the same needs. So on one side we have extreme individualism, and on the other side we have extreme collectivism. Both are extremely detrimental and is going to destroy us. And the elephant in the room we are neglecting is our loss and our non-acknowledgement, non-consideration of wisdom. This is the elephant in the room, okay? That we are ignoring at our own peril. Especially all of life, all of material and immaterial world, we are all connected. I cannot live without the plants. I eat the plants. I cannot live without some animals because I depend on them for my nutrition. And a lot of other things for emotional support. My dog is sleeping right there. Okay? The unconditional love an animal shows to you, the kindness you show to animals and plants, all these things are born out of wisdom. And in Eastern philosophies, in the Veda and all, it says that everything that matters in life cannot be measured. And that which can be measured is not real. In other words, we can measure material things and, what is manifest in front of us. But that's not what we are living for. We want to live for the things that are not measurable. Right? So in conclusion, I'm going to talk about two stories quickly because I think it's very interesting. One is, recently, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to be in a couple's home. The couples were they were in their late 30s, and they just had an infant. The baby was about 3 or 4 months old, and I had to live with them for a few days, so I stayed with them. And I noticed that when both of them, both had very high level jobs, so they both left very early in the morning, and the mother had left this big list of instructions for the nanny who would come by the time she left. And the instructions basically went minute to minute. Okay, 7 o'clock, change the baby's diaper. Baby will wake up, change the baby's diaper. Then feed the baby 2 ounces of this much milk, only 2 ounces. And then, if the baby is still unhappy, maybe you can give a little bit more of the formula, and only this much, 1 ounce. And then put the baby to sleep, and then the baby will wake up at this time, and at that time do this, that, and this. Take the baby out for, minute to minute, minute to minute. So what happened? I observed a very unusual phenomenon. So when the parents came back from in the evening, they would take this baby out for a walk. I don't remember exactly how many months, maybe 4 or 5 months old, maybe 3 or 4 months, for a walk, and in that little baby carrier that sits on the chest. And no sooner would the mother come, and feed the baby. She was breastfeeding then, and the couple would take, and I would also go out for a walk. The baby would start crying loudly, loudly, loudly. The whole walk, the baby would be inconsolable, not extreme crying, right? And it was, to make a long story short, it was very unhappy for the parents, and they didn't feel good, and they both felt bad about why the baby is crying and all that. So anyway, the next day, I noticed the same phenomena, okay? And I'm also a physician, and I kind of started observing this child, and I realized that the child was very hungry most of the time. And that's why there was a lot of crying episodes in between. Otherwise, right after the feed, he was quite happy. So the next day, the nanny was in her 50s, and I was also in my 50s. We both looked at the child, we looked at each other and smiled. And I said, you know what, I'll take responsibility. Today we are going to give this kid 2 ounces of a little bit more formula. And if he still wants it, we'll give him a little bit more. So we did that day without the permission of the parents. Okay? I was close enough to them that I thought it's okay, I could do it. That evening the parents came back. And lo and behold, we went for a walk, and the baby was not crying. And the mother said, Jack must like you so much. Jack is not crying anymore, And in my mind, I thought, I didn't want to tell them that this is what we did. But then later on, when I thought the time was right, that I could broach the subject, I told the mother the reason the baby was not crying was we did give her a little bit more formula. And the mother's reaction was horrible. She ran into the bedroom crying, and she thought basically she's not a good mother because she's not producing enough breast milk. And then her husband, was not happy that I said this and all. But I'm saying this story to show what happens when you replace grandma's wisdom with Google. If you replace grandma's or your own mother's wisdom with Google, this is what happens. We live a very, very mechanical, dissected life. In other words, we make sure all the ingredients of the soup are together, but we never cook the soup. And this is a big problem. Why we have no meaning, lots of mental illness, loneliness, all these things. We have gone from transformational relationships to transactional relationships, which will be another talk of mine. And it's basically assuring our destruction. Okay? Unfortunately, the video is... Okay. The other story is my own uncle in the village. Kerala, parts of India have become very affluent, and this is my mom's brother. Lived a full life, lived to like 94, and then he started deteriorating and essentially ready to die. And by then, one of the status symbols in the place where I live in Kerala for people who are wealthy became how much end of life care, intrusive care you gave the parents was how you were measured. Like how much you could afford these things and all. There was a subconscious thing. It was a combination of ignorance, ego, and not being able to accept life, death, sorry, the process of dying. And this uncle, who was just a vibrant, wonderful person, spent the last 3-4 months of his life at home with a feeding tube, which of course the nurse was overfilling, and he was constantly coughing and aspirating and completely miserable, even unable to speak, having a lot of pneumonias and things like that. When I visited him, I tried to talk to the family about, I'm an internist, I'm also a geriatrician, about how we are doing all this for us to feel good, not for the patient. But that's about how much I tried to have a little bit of influence. But I would not like to die like that. And it's a bunch of misguided things that materially taking care of a person is the measure of the love you show them, or at least it's the appearance of the love and the care you show for them. All misguided, all leading to a lot of sorrow, suffering, unnecessary sorrow and suffering. This is the state of it. And not to mention the incredible profit the hospital, the people they sent out, for the respiratory care, for the tube feeding, the nurse who, it was an industry. The suffering of a dying man has become an industry. This is the world that we live in. And it is really sad and pathetic. And it guarantees a demise. Guarantees a demise. If not from anything else, from loss of meaning and not having a willingness to live. Because we do not matter. That's the message we are getting with wisdom absent in our life. So to conclude, wisdom caters to our values that cannot be measured, like love, compassion, caring, sharing, camaraderie, forgiveness. Those are the things. That makes us human, and that makes our life meaningful and wonderful. Right? We can get through any hardship with that. And we will immediately reverse the nature, what we are doing to nature and animals, if we had wisdom, if we lived by wisdom in all activities, right? This is our only hope for survival. I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that. We better acknowledge this elephant in the room, treat it very kindly, and let it guide us out of this huge, huge catastrophe that we are walking into. Thank you so much. This was my first video, and I will be back again soon with my next one. And the next one will be about going from transactional to transformational relationships. Thank you.